listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast, hosted by Zach Bechtold and Matt Franks. We hope you enjoyed today's podcast and check us out online at beardedtheologians.com. You're listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast, hosted by Matt Franks
and Zach Bechtold.
This week on the Bearded Theologians, with Thanksgiving in the crosshairs of our calendars, we kind of wanted to talk about the spiritual practice of sharing a meal. And so, Zach, as you reflect upon the spiritual practice of sharing a meal, what comes to mind?
You know, it's no secret that if you follow me on Facebook or Instagram, then I like to eat. And I like to eat large meals. So Thanksgiving is obviously one of my favorite times of the year. And a lot of it has to do with the food, but a lot of it has to do with gathering together as family. And especially now that I don't live at home, I'm the black sheep of my family, and we live 1,500 miles from home, where everybody else in my immediate family lives within at most an hour's drive. And so this is the time. This year we're not going back for Thanksgiving, but my in-laws are coming up. But Thanksgiving, Christmas, when we come to get together in these meal sharing times, it's always fruitful. We get to come together and see cousins and family that we don't get to see very often, if not just at Thanksgiving and Christmas. I'm going to lump that in as well. And so it's an exciting time. You know, we get to catch up. We get to have some awkward conversations that we'll talk about next week. But it's just that time to gather together around a table, which I think is important, one, but I think is spiritual as well. When Jesus gathered with people, whether it be the disciples or the tax collectors or religious leaders, he often did it around a table. And when we see, especially when Jesus gathers with, the less than, or the Gentiles, or whomever, it's around this table and lives are changed. Something happens around that table in those conversations with Jesus that makes an impact on the lives of people. And I think the same thing happens for us when we gather around the table for these meals. They become sacred, and something happens. Our relationships strengthen. And just a different type of conversation happens than it would be if we're just, sitting at our parents' house, talking or hanging out. There's something about the table and these meals that we come together with that become sacred. Matt, what about you?
Well, I grew up I had a large family, and so for me, Thanksgiving was really about a time always of getting together with everybody. And having that, that cordial football game or basketball game that would always break out, and then watching, football, watching the Dallas Cowboys, and there's something about that is, I wouldn't say watching the Dallas Cowboys is actually a holy thing. It's almost unholy.
If you're in Texas, it is.
But there is something about having that time together and that meal that makes things feel special and sacred. And I can always remember the time in with Thanksgiving things is that we'd have that stranger, so-and-so would, somebody would always bring somebody home that was different, and we'd open up their home, open up our family and our home to the table for these people to show them our craziness. And sometimes they came back, and sometimes they married into the family and they're stuck. But when I think of sharing a meal together, I believe a lot of great things can be done over sharing a meal, because I feel like that's when you're most vulnerable. I feel like that when you're sharing a meal with someone, you're opening yourself up to just breaking bread. There's just something very spiritual about that. And I think Jesus knew exactly what he was doing when he took the bread and broke it and said, "This is my body broken for you," as a great reminder for us that every time we do this, that, man, but I also think, like, for me, it is really about, there is just something special about it, just getting together and having a meal together. I love doing that. Like, that's, when I was in Norman, that was one of my favorite things to do. Is on Thursdays, I was at Fuzzy's for lunch and said, "Hey, just come have lunch with me. Let's talk." And I was really big And trying to get back to that now in my new appointment is to say, hey, let's go have lunch. Let's go. I joke, we have free lunch over at the Wesleys on Wednesdays, and I always joke with people, hey, let me go buy your lunch on Wednesdays. I know of a great place I can buy your lunch. And we have to be aware of how sharing a meal with people is really a great time to sit down and actually have genuine conversation where people aren't feeling rushed, because if you eat too fast, you can get sick. And so why not share a meal together and have great conversations?
Well, and oftentimes when we come together over a meal, gosh, there's no agenda. I know there are circumstances where we have to have meetings at meals and things like that, but generally when we come together in meals like that, meals like Thanksgiving, there's no agenda other than to simply be present. And so there's not that in the back of your mind of, oh, we've got to talk about this, we've got to get this done. No, we're simply just coming and accepting the invitation to come and eat and to be present. And there's something big about that. Like you said, those walls break down and genuine conversation happens in those moments. Genuine relationship building happens in those moments where, like I said, if you're just sitting around or you're sitting in an office, those don't happen as fluidly as they do when we sit down and break bread with one another. What about, so you brought up, and I was going to mention it too, always having a stranger at these sacred meals or at Thanksgiving or whatever. I got on the sacred meals thing. My parents do that too. They're notorious for that. And it's always, it just cracks me up. But it's such a beautiful thing and it's always somebody different. And maybe they married into the family, like you said, or maybe they were truly a stranger and you see them for one meal and never again, or very rarely. What is that? What do you think that looks like for us today as we prepare for our Thanksgiving meals? What do you think that looks like in our encouragement, not only for our family, but for the people that we work with and oversee in our churches?
Well, I always think of, is it in Hebrews 13 where they talk about, always be welcoming of others because you don't know they may be angels. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying that anybody's, your parents may invite someone that may not be an angel. They may be far from
You're
it,
not passing out angel status here. We're just saying.
and I'm not saying, I've been one of those guests, and I know I'm far from an angel, but and
I can affirm that
my mannerisms are not necessarily proper. I was raised in a different home, dang it. But I think that we have to be aware of it and open to the opportunity of a stranger and what that may mean for us. It's always a good self-examination of saying, wow, they were okay, or they were, I enjoyed getting to know them, or, oh my gosh, they brought so-and-so, and, they become the news story that becomes the bar of the stranger. And what I mean by bar of the stranger, I mean, is that every so often we'll have these people that will be a part of our lives, and they kind of give us a standard to either follow or not to follow. Right. And, you never know how the stranger may affect the meal. And I was thinking, so this came up yesterday when we were watching, the girls and I were watching this little show, this kid show on Disney Channel called Andy Mac. And it's kind of a cool little show to watch. And they were celebrating.
It wasn't the cat reality show?
No, it wasn't the cat reality show. That drove me insane. But in this Andy Mac episode, they were celebrating Chinese New Year, and Andy invited this boy that she was interested in, and he was obviously a white male stranger and had no clue that the pot sticker sitting on the table was an offering for the sake, for the people that the family members that have asked. And so he was like super hungry, and he just reached over and grabbed it and ate it, and just like nice. Those are those stories that you'll live to tell forever, and they bring a sense of happiness and like a time of like, but they can also cause like, and in this case, it kind of shifted the whole conversation downhill. And, it's a great little episode. It's a great little show, but it got me thinking about how in our conversation that, every so often those strangers set a bar, either a positive or negative. And it's like, yeah, we don't ever want them to come around again, or man, if they don't come the next year, like, where's Jimmy? Like, we really miss Jimmy. We'd love to have Jimmy. Why didn't Jimmy come this year? And
Right.
or I don't know about you, like in your college years, or when you were in high school and stuff, but when you would bring that girl home and like you broke up and like you hear it, man, we really miss so and so. She was just so fun to be around. Like, yeah, there's reasons why we broke up, but we won't get into that.
Since my wife doesn't listen to this podcast, I didn't date in high school, and so she can't argue that. She has not nice things to say about my dating life in high school. No, it's interesting though, because I love that idea of bringing the stranger in. And one of my favorite things about working with Wesley students or in campus ministry when I did that, I had she was my board chair at the time, and she every year was, if you have students that don't go home for Thanksgiving, send them to my house. They're welcome here. And I had a couple of board members and a couple of people in the churches that always offered that up of, hey, if you've got people hanging around, whether they're one of your students or they're just on campus, please, 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 please send them to my house. They're welcome here. And I think that's such a beautiful thing, and welcoming in the stranger, whether they're really strange or they're truly just somebody we don't know. I think that's a really cool thing. And, those relationships, especially in the college years when you're young and you're broke, and maybe you can't afford to go home, or you don't have a home to go to, that's huge. Those are the relationships and the moments in your life that when you get older, you go, that made a difference. That was huge.
Well, and I think that's the key is that, we should always be trying to maybe finding a stranger to welcome in. And the meal is a great way to bring someone close and to bring someone in and to have them be on the same level as you. And that does change things. It changes the way that we operate. It changes the way that when you invite someone in, you're bringing them to a level playing field versus, hey, let's have just this get together and oh wait, you can't come because you don't have X, Y, and Z. But I think that with the meal, especially and we think of Thanksgiving, Thanksgiving is a great time to do this, is when we are truly open and we say, hey, I've got this food. We've got more than enough. Why don't you come? We're sharing out of our abundance, which is kind of my big push right now in my congregation, is to share out of our abundance, because we all have abundance, and and everybody's abundance looks differently than you should never compare your abundance to someone else. You should just utilize it and do the best you can with your abundance, because when you can transform lives. And I think for me, that's the important part of spiritual meals and having meals that are intentional of sharing common ground.
Well, and I think that's our encouragement for this week, as we're leading into Thanksgiving. We're doing this a week early, so that you have time to prepare and really pray and identify those people in your lives that potentially be a stranger at your table, who may not have a table to go to this Thanksgiving. And so we want to encourage you to do that, to share in your abundance, if there's a need and if it's possible. And don't get yourself into a shady situation by picking truly strangers up off the street and bringing them into your home if you don't know them and don't know the situation. Please don't do that. We don't condone.
Always be safe.
Always be safe. Yes. We don't condone dangerous actions, and that can potentially be. But we want you to think about that, because we do, Thanksgiving is that time where we come together and we do have an abundance. There's no other agenda than getting together and eating and probably taking a nap and watching football. It's not like Christmas where there's presents before or after and you have to worry about that. This is truly a time to gather together. And so our encouragement for you is how do you do that? With your family, with your friends, and with the strangers in your lives. How can you be present there for them and invite them into this sacred space? We want to encourage you to check out beardedtheologians.com. We have great mugs that make great Christmas gifts, shirts and onesies. We know a lot of you out there have had friends and family who have had babies. We have really awesome onesies. We know that you have friends and family and pastors that drink coffee. Get them a coffee mug for Christmas. They make great stocking stuffers. You can also go on and find all of our past blogs. We have some great contributors that have written for us in the last couple of weeks. We've got some really, really cool stuff coming up. Thanksgiving week is going to be a week full of blogs. There won't be a post that week. because it's Thanksgiving and we're going to be here, there, and yonder as well as you are. So we've got a really cool week's worth of blogs coming up from a lot of different voices. Check all of those things out. And we really, really appreciate all your support and continued listening and sharing on Facebook and social media. Join in the conversation with us. Share your stories about inviting strangers into your home for Thanksgiving, or just the fun Thanksgiving conversations that you have had over the years. We'd love to hear those stories. We'd love to hear where God's working out in your life. And for the Bearded Theologians, I'm Zach Bechtold.
I'm Matt Franks.
Thanks for checking us out.
Thank you for listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast. We hope you've enjoyed listening, and we hope that you share our content online through Facebook and social media, and we hope that you check out our Beardcast store at beardedtheologians.com and pick up some great Bearded Theologians gear. We hope you have a good day. Zach is glowing like an angel.
I know. Jesus is also glowing behind me right here.